On the Alaskan frontier, Lee's wife Jane gets a black eye on her first try at shooting. The powerful recoil of the scope hits her eye, making her roll in pain. They had planned to hunt black bears, and Lee had prepared a new rifle for her, but now they must head home for her to recover. Still, Jane asks how many targets she hit. Lee shows her the results. The bullet barely grazed the edge, leaving a lasting impression. The next day, after resting in the cabin, Lee takes Jane out again. Her eye is better, though her vision is still blurry. Lee hands her yesterday's rifle and says, "Get back on the horse where you fell." Jane decides to practice again but removes the scope to avoid another injury. Encouraged by her progress, she reattaches the scope, vowing never to touch it again if she hits her eye. Lee notices her avoiding the scope and thinks he might give up on teaching her. Sure enough, she misses again, and Lee can only tell her to relax. The two ride to a nearby canyon to hunt black bears. Finding bears in dense woods is nearly impossible, so they split up. Surprisingly, the less skilled Jane has good luck. She spots a black bear 600 meters away while climbing high, but can't hit it due to the distance and has to descend. After regrouping, they devise a strategy to move deeper into the woods but soon feel the danger shift from hunter to hunted. Tall bushes make movement difficult, but they decide to risk it for fresh meat. As darkness falls, Lee climbs a tree with no luck and abandons the hunt. Alaska's spring is short, summer even shorter, just about 2 weeks. 30 miles away at the bay, Lee and Jane prepare to hunt black bears again. Last time, Jane was injured, but this time, they're determined. Hunting requires patience and absolute silence. Lee finds fresh black bear droppings, along with grizzly tracks nearby. In Alaska, grizzlies prey on black bears, so they stay alert. At the water source, a brown dot appears in the distance, a grizzly. It approaches, unbothered by human scent. After the grizzly enters the water, Lee and Jane watch nervously until it suddenly growls at them, and Lee raises his gun. Luckily, the grizzly turns into the woods, sparing them from a potentially deadly encounter. They quickly retreat, and Jane remains shaken from her first close encounter with a grizzly. Since grizzlies deter black bears, they're at a loss. Meanwhile, Old Ats finds his horses spooked and fresh grizzly tracks at his riverside cabin, so he arms himself and rides out, just as Lee and Jane arrive. The three track the grizzly together, but it reappears. Their weapons can't guarantee a clean kill, so they retreat to protect the horses. This elusive grizzly ends their black bear hunt for good. A man aims a Win-94 rifle at an old cow, pulls the trigger, and secures the meat needed for survival. After each failed hunt, they rely on Otto's cattle to fill the gap. Though this isn't the first time, Eve is still affected. Otto and his younger son August begin processing the cow. They cut open the hide, attach chains, and hoist the beef with a tow truck. Everything seems to go smoothly until the cow suddenly falls, nearly crushing the son. He reacts quickly, and Otto takes his place to continue. Since organs spoil fastest and for safety, they decide not to hang them and process them immediately. Half an hour later, the organs are removed, and the whole family helps. Otto uses a saw to cut the meat, preparing to hang it later for jerky. Meanwhile, Eve and Charlotte render tallow from the cow. The organs aren't wasted after boiling. The fat separates. The sight of abundant fat brings security to Alaskans. Few know that tallow can also make soap. They wait for the fat to solidify. Charlotte explains the steps. First, sugar is sprinkled into water, and she puts on goggles. The delicate work causes a glass container to crack due to temperature changes. Just then, a baby pees behind her, and Eve rushes to clean it up. Charlotte switches to a metal container and continues. After cooling, the fat is stirred until it thickens into soap. For fragrance, they add vegetable and floral scents. Once cooled, the soap is wrapped in towels and left to set for a day or two. Meanwhile, Avon and Otto tan leather. They mix wood ash with water to create a strong alkaline solution. Pour it into a metal drum and add the cowhide. After days, the water turns brown, and the hair falls off easily. The soaked hide weighs dozens of pounds, so they lift it out, scrape it on the grass, and prepare it for leather clothing. Still raw, it needs drying and stretching to become perfect leather. Summer arrives in Alaska, and Lee and his wife Jean fertilize the soil with peat moss, straw, and shells. The mostly barren tundra becomes fertile when mixed with alkaline materials. To grow winter vegetables, they must first clear and fertilize the land. The next day, the soil loosens, requiring another round of tilling. Straw adds nitrogen and carbon, and finally, red cabbage is planted. At the same time, Old Ats tries to mark a calf. The ranch has nearly 100 cattle, many newborns. After several failed attempts with a lasso, he finally ropes the calf, tags it to distinguish it from wild cattle, and castrates it. Once done, he releases the calf. Back at the ranch, Ats and his wife Bonnie scatter grass seeds by hand to feed the horses. The seeds grow quickly. At the end of the bay, Ats transforms this wild land into a thriving ranch. He uses a chainsaw to cut logs, nails, and chains to drag them with a tractor, compacting the grass and improving efficiency. Autumn arrives quietly. Ivan and his wife Eve begin stockpiling meat for winter. They take a speedboat to a hunting island in Alaska, hoping to bag 1 or 2 black-tailed deer. The dark woods are full of grizzlies, so they must hunt cautiously. First, they set up a shelter before venturing out. A portable tent is quickly assembled, and the two begin searching for prey. This is Eve's second deer hunt with Ivan. She's both excited and nervous. They head uphill, following a path through the trees. Time quickly arrived the next day. Ivan set out alone on his journey to find black-tailed deer, and traveling solo significantly increased his speed. The best time to hunt large deer is during the ascent or at the summit. Meanwhile, Eve discovered a brown bear habitat at the mountain's base. The bear droppings were still warm, clearly fresh. Eve didn't linger and quickly prepared to leave. Ivan's climb was no easy feat. He had started at 6 a.m. and walked for hours to reach the highest point. Tall trees gradually disappeared, and bare rock faces were covered in grass seeds. Ivan spotted a short-tailed deer foraging. He raised his weapon 150 meters was well within range, but when he zoomed in with the scope, he noticed the deer appeared pregnant. Despite traveling far for meat, Ivan felt compassion and ultimately abandoned the hunt. As the sun set, another day passed. Eve continued searching along the stream, while Ivan climbed the ridge. Spotting crows feeding in the sky, Ivan lowered his body. Not far ahead, a buck appeared on the summit prime hunting opportunity. Ivan aimed and fired but missed. The deer turned and ran. Perhaps still groggy, the buck circled in place, remaining in Ivan's sight. He fired a second shot, again missing, but the buck stood still. The third shot finally hit, and the deer fell. Ivan rushed over, crouched, and lifted the antlers. For safety, he immediately processed the carcass with his knife. If he returned to the base, it would take hours, and by then, the bear might have taken the deer. Ivan removed the entrails and tossed them off the cliff, then dragged the buck toward camp. Now, he had precious meat stored for winter, but the hardest work lay ahead. Without a backpack, Ivan could only drag the deer. Steep cliffs nearly caused him to slip. Descending was treacherous. At one point, he tried to lower the meat with a rope, but it snapped. At nearly 3,000 feet, Ivan circled helplessly before deciding to butcher the meat on the spot, taking only about 80 pounds back. After climbing hills and crossing streams, Ivan was exhausted when he finally reached the base. Ivan greeted him with the meat, and the two rested together, roasting venison to regain strength. Soon, Ivan's mother arrived by boat to take them home, ending the winter deer hunt. At Kachemak Bay, Jean and Eve's sisters-in-law were on a winter fishing mission. In the vast, deep sea, they hoped to catch halibut to fill their freezer for winter. The waves were unpredictable. To attract fish, they first crushed fish meat as bait, letting the scent lure deep-sea predators. The crushed meat was placed in a net and cast into the water, but instead of halibut, seagulls swarmed the surface, competing for food. Jean then threaded a large hook through a piece of fish and hurled it into the sea. Eve, a complete novice, watched and learned. The line had to be let out until it hit the bottom. Soon, the rod jerked, and reeling required both of them. This was a sizable fish. The process was grueling. The bait had sunk hundreds of meters, and each turn of the reel was laborious. Their persistence paid off when the first halibut surfaced. Jean used a nearby hook to bring it aboard, then knocked it out with 2 strikes. Before they could celebrate, a second bite came. The line reeled in another halibut. Similar in size, perhaps the bait worked. After rebaiting, both rods yielded results. Jean and Eve tightened the line, and another lively halibut was knocked out upon landing. Their haul was already impressive. To catch a bigger fish, Jean switched to a larger bait and cast again. The rod strained under a massive pull. This fish weighed at least 30 pounds. She called for Eve to grab a rifle to prevent escape, then hooked the gill and hauled the fish aboard. It was noticeably larger than the others, and the two cheered. 4 halibuts yielded about 6,070 pounds of meat, so their day's work was done. Time to head home. In Alaska, Old Atz packed early that morning, loading his tricycle with his wife Bonnie to hunt black bears and replenish their winter meat supply. At the beach, they didn't rush to hunt. Instead, Bonnie and Atz gathered berries on the slope. Berries paired with bear meat were a delicacy. These rose hips could be made into jam, served with meat and bread. As winter approached, the berries were ripe, and they quickly filled half a basket. Just as Atz prepared to move to the next spot, a black bear appeared. He quickly exited the vehicle, took aim, and fired. The bear tumbled down the slope. Bonnie covered her ears, and after the hunt, Atz hurried to inspect his meal, while Bonnie stood crying, mourning the loss of life. Approaching the bear, Atz assessed its size no older than 3 years, fully grown. He delivered a fatal shot. Bonnie, solemn, admitted she disliked seeing creatures killed, even if the meat was eaten. It left her conflicted. Atz, unfazed, focused on transporting the bear home. If they lacked moose meat this year, a bear and some fish would suffice for winter. Back at their residence, Atz unloaded the bear, removed its entrails promptly to prevent spoilage, and skinned it. Despite reluctance, Bonnie helped. The process yielded about 50 pounds of boneless meat, ensuring they wouldn't go hungry for months. In Alaska's coastal grass, Atz aimed his new shotgun at wild ducks, humming a yodel. Today, he and friend Lane hunted geese. After setting up decoys and blinds, they loaded their weapons. Atz, accustomed to rifles for bears, had bought a shotgun for this task. The weather was overcast, windy, and rainy, ideal for low-flying ducks. Their calls drew a flock to a distant pond, but Atz's impatience scared them off, much to Lane's amusement. The next day, Atz returned with Lane's 2 children. This time, they worked in pairs. Atz, more confident, hit a duck with his first shot, then another, and another. The group feasted on their catch in the wild. For Atz, in his 70 seconds, hunting was about learning and staying sharp, a choice he embraced. A seaplane flew toward southern Alaska. Lee and Ivan's families teamed up for a deer hunt. This winter, without snow, tracking was unusually hard. The 4 split into 2 groups, ascending slowly. Suddenly, Lee spotted 3 deer, running less than 200 meters away. Jean fired, but forgot to remove the safety, causing a dangerous misfire. After recovering, they pursued, but Lee missed again. Dark clouds rolled in, forcing them to descend and resume the next day. At dawn, Avon spotted a black-tailed deer on soft moss, took aim, and fired. The deer yielded 4,050 pounds of meat. Meanwhile, Lee and Jean climbed steep cliffs, hoping for better visibility. At sunset, Jean heard movement. A black-tailed buck appeared. She signaled Lee to shoot, but the deer vanished into thickets. They regrouped, with Jean driving the prey toward Lee. After 2 misses, Lee finally hit, though not fatally, and had to finish it off. On the final day, snow began to fall. From a high vantage point, they spotted a buck over 300 meters away. All 3 fired. Only Jean hit a leg. They coordinated. Jean and the guide observed while Lee and Ivan flanked. Successfully, they packed the meat and headed home. Back at the ranch, Bonnie and Eve heated poplar buds in oil, cooled them, and mixed with beeswax to create medicinal salve for Ivan's son's eczema. With Eve pregnant again, they prepared for the baby's arrival. In Alaska's Kachemak Bay, the belated late winter blizzard finally arrived. Old Atz and his farm friend Jones were heading to the cabin today to address the long-standing tree problem. Near the cabin, a group of beavers had been causing trouble, having gnawed through all the trees along the shore. Many people find beavers cute and fluffy, but a 40-pound beaver, if allowed to reproduce, could devour an entire riverside forest in a year. So their goal was clear: set beaver traps and catch the prey. Upon reaching the riverbank, they saw many trees damaged by beavers. Walking to the riverbed, the hollowed-out embankment was where the beaver's den was located. These creatures were fascinating. They typically dug their burrows during low tide, so by high tide, the entrance would be below the waterline. Unlike beavers in ponds, which build lodges, these riverbank beavers had very secure homes because the entrance was beneath the river. It was this behavior that caused the land on both sides of the riverbank to collapse. Old Otts and his friend used saws to collect poplar wood for the traps, then placed bait made from beaver glands to attract them. They also fenced off the area, ensuring the beaver would be trapped if it appeared. After setting up, they had to wait until the next morning to check. The next morning, the two arrived at the trap site, and it seemed empty. Then, they went to the den on the other side of the embankment, where Old Otts and his friend successfully caught a beaver. This one was quite large, with a scar on its tail and long, captivating incisors, weighing about 40 pounds. Since only this one was caught today, they assumed this was the only one in the area. The untriggered traps should be retrieved. They prepared to return, skin the beaver, and keep the meat as winter food. Lee and his wife Jane are starting to brew beer today. Many consider brewing unimportant, but alcohol warms their family in cold winters. Brewing in Alaska requires careful ingredient selection. On Lee's farm, the most precious resource is water. Natural spring water, the ideal choice for beer. In southern Alaska, a new day begins. Lee and Jane rise before dawn to brew stout beer. Generally, wheat-based beer takes 1 to 2 weeks to mature. Yesterday's purified water must be heated, not boiled. Then malt is crushed and mixed. Constant water temperature activates the wheat syrup, higher sugar content, enhances fermentation, their goal. Once the mash reaches porridge-like consistency, it's boiled for an hour and sealed. Lee learned this craft over 20 years, passed down 4 generations. Since his grandfather's time, using stone mills. Jane steers the wheel like a helm, watching crushed wheat turn to powder, while Lee handles other tasks. A successful batch yields 70+ liters. The process is lengthy. After heating spring water, wheat grains are added. To react with sugar, the pungent odor makes Jane cover her nose, but it's unavoidable. Lee finds joy in brewing, wanting his family to taste his creations. Now, sediment at the barrel's bottom must be stirred and fermented repeatedly until the color darkens. When hops, the final ingredient, are added. This step enhances aroma. The large jar holds dried wildflowers, like a giant spice bag. At last, they connect the fermentation tank, add beer and yeast. Heated malt sugar ferments, producing fresh beer in weeks. For 70 winters, the Kilcher family has moved most cattle to Kachemak Bay's lush pastures. The farm lacks sufficient grass, while the bay's north offers vast grazing, easing year-round feeding pressure. This year, many calves were born. The 32 km journey crosses beach mud and streams. 2 years ago, Otto tried this. Some calves were only 3 days old, risking drowning in rising water. A solution was needed. Before releasing the herd, a white cow's distinct fur must be dyed black to avoid predators. After hours of preparation, they open the gate. Dozens of cows rush out toward the beach. With winter ending, rising water and mud leave no time to waste. Some newborn calves can't cross. A raft is needed. The river seems wider than last year. Using waterproof cloth and rope, Ivan secures driftwood to make a raft for the calves. Back at the fence, they catch a light brown calf. Time is tight. Charlotte pins it down, binding its legs to restrain it. Meanwhile, the herd begins crossing. The real test comes as Ivan and Otto arrive with the calf float. Placing the calf on the raft, they cross successfully. Better than expected. Ivan repeats the process, completing the seasonal cattle migration smoothly. Late spring snow in Alaska covers the ground around the Wheeler farm. Atz, his wife Bonnie, and son Lee are helping a late friend's widow, Linda, with counting and classifying the horse herd. Upon arriving at the ranch, there's still much unmelting snow. Their task is to bring back a herd of wild horses that have roamed freely for over half a year. The herd includes both domesticated and wild horses. Horses are pack animals. If the male leader can be found, the herd will follow. Lee uses fresh hay to lure the horses into the corral, then spreads wheat straw and hay inside. Horses crowded in tight spaces can easily get agitated, especially with some untamed ones. Atz is a skilled horse trainer. He usually starts by teaching them to run along the fence. Taming is a gradual process. Atz takes off his coat and enters the corral, beginning to tame this wild horse, until the black wild horse allows Atz to approach. Next comes this clearly tough white wild horse. This time, Lee volunteers to tame it. After walking round after round, the white horse suddenly stops obeying, stands still, staring straight at Lee. Finally, Lee approaches to stroke its fur, calming it down. Alaska's warm winter has lasted 2 years, and spring has finally arrived. Everything revives, green and lush. Throughout late winter, the Kilcher family has been working hard to tend to their livestock. Now the freezer is empty of meat. It's time to go hunting black bears. This time, Atz goes with the young man Brian, using bows and arrows to hunt. Alaska is colder than anywhere else, so they need to replenish plenty of fat. In spring, many black bears graze on grass seeds by the beach. With low activity, the meat is tender. That's why Atz hunts one black bear every year at this time. After arriving by kayak, Brian tests his recurve bow, while Atz carries a high-tech compound bow. To protect the bowstring, they apply wax to prevent wear. The sharp arrowheads can even be used for shaving. For safety, they also carry firearms during the hunt. After applying face paint, they head to the coast of Nuka Island. Timing is crucial for spring black bear hunting. Bears hibernate in high snow zones, and when they wake up, they need to eat. At this time, beach grass seeds are the easiest food source. But along the way, Atz checks the grass and caves carefully, finding no bear tracks. The most plausible explanation is, the warm winter made spring come early, and the bears have already descended, eaten the grass seeds, and returned to the hills. Atz and Brian set off immediately, heading into the forest. The higher they go, the more dangers they face. Halfway up the mountain, a light rain starts falling. After discussing, they continue toward the summit. Following a stream, the rain soaks their Eva, but hunting inevitably involves such challenges. Not far away, a black bear rests on the slope. The wind is in their favor, so they circle around and lie low on the slope. The real hunt begins. After some distance, tall bushes block their view, but the black bear is clearly visible ahead. They keep moving uphill, trying to calm down before the bear notices them. They hold their breath and shoot. The bear hides in the spruce thicket. Atz spots it from 30 meters away, but before he can act, the bear slips away again. To avoid failure, they continue tracking. Finally, at a higher point, they see the bear leaving the valley, heading into the woods below. The distance is at least 200 meters. Too far for hunting. The young Brian doesn't want to give up. He fires a shot just before the bear leaves, trying his luck. Watching the bear run, Brian is sure he hit it. Now they need to find the bear. To conclude the hunt, in the southern mountains of the Kenai Peninsula, following bloodstains on the grass, they trace the path to the alder thicket. Atz and Brian find their first prey of the year, but the bear seems still alive. They approach cautiously, only confirming its death after checking. This is a healthy 4-year-old male bear, providing ample meat for over a month. Sitting on the ground, Atz and Brian stroke the bear's smooth fur, then drag the 100-pound carcass to an open area to process the meat. Unlike buying meat from stores, when they eat this, they'll remember this hunting experience.